Hey everyone, and I am here joined with Gianni Musemeci, and today we're going to be talking about property. It's one thing that Gianni loves, and I must admit I love property as well too. I often refer to it as one of my sons, the other one being shares as well too. But Gianni, how are you, mate?
I'm good, thank you, John. Yeah, welcome back. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
That's it. And yeah, I have been a little bit MIA, been kind of gallivanting through Europe, kind of soaking it all in. I nearly got stuck there, mate, out of choice. I was involved such in the culture and the espressos and the pizza and the pasta. I nearly got stuck there, but they dragged me back. There's some children's activities and school stuff that's back here that kind of dragged me back. Or you might have lost me, Gianni. We might have been doing this podcast by somewhere in the Mediterranean.
My secret dream is to go to Europe and buy one of those €1 houses and just spend a year or two doing it up. Like that's my one day goal sort of thing.
Oh, yeah. I can see a YouTube channel starting out of that.
Oh,
Gianni.
yeah.
I can see it's YouTube Gianni's $1, makeover.
Yeah.
But mate, let's get into it because there's been a lot from my perspective in regards to the property front. Obviously, property is very much, linked to interest rates. For those people that, thought that, interest rates just weren't correlated to property or, they've quickly learned about that. But it's very interesting for what's going on in the property market from my observations because, interest rates have gone up. We're up 4%. From the bottoms. Banks are locking in significant kind of fixed interest rates. There's a lot of people kind of concerned in regards to their rates and what's going on, but it's having an effect that I'm seeing on investors in the property market. You've got, buyers from one side of things, and you've obviously got the sellers. And so I know you've got your finger on the pulse and you've got, you understand exactly what's going on here. So I'd love to learn in your side of things. What observations are you seeing in regards to buyers looking to buy? How are they feeling at the moment?
Yeah, look, there's a sense of frustration out there, and that's because for the better part of this year, there's been a big difference between the amount of buyers and the amount of sellers. Long story short, there's no listings out there. And so when I speak to buyers in the marketplace at inspection or at auction, the average time frame that they've been looking for a property is I'll say 6 to 9 months is the average time frame. I've got clients at the moment that have been looking for 2 years and before they engaged me. So that's the sort of average time frame to find the property, really. I'd say 6 to 9 months.
It's crazy. So what we're finding is, so just break this down a little bit more, Gianni. So what you're finding is that the demand is still there, relatively there for people to want to buy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But the stock is not available, and therefore, are you also though having demand drop away as well too? What's that look like? Because the sense that I'm feeling is that there's people that are now afraid of the property market. They've seen maybe one or two people now start to lose money on a property. They've now started to hear some of the horror stories, and I could only imagine that stock must be that limited, that we haven't seen any effect yet. So are you seeing that as well too, or am I just observing something different?
Look, it's a bit of both. There is an increase in supply, and there is an increase in demand rather, and a decrease in supply. The reason for the increase in demand is because we have more people in the country. Long story short, okay. 400,000 people additional have come to the country, and you've got to look at it proportionately. So look at Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. They probably hold roughly 40% of Australia's population in those three capital cities. So if you spread 400,000 amongst those 3-4 capital cities, then you're looking at sort of 150, 160,000 extra people in those capital cities. But then you've also got natural population increases through, people wanting to move out of home and starting a family and that sort of stuff. So not only do you have the natural demand for property, but you also have external demand for property. So we know that there's a number of visa holders that have come in, and they're either here on a temporary or permanent visa. Typically, you can only buy on a permanent visa. If you buy on a temporary visa, there's certain penalties and restrictions associated with purchasing. So again, it's only added more demand for not only rental, but purchasing property as well. In terms of the number of listings, over the last sort of few years, we've seen a decline in the number of properties being completed under construction. And that stems back all the way to 2017 to 2019, when APRA limited they had restrictions around borrowing capacity. I was talking to an economist not long ago, and he showed a direct correlation between APRA's restrictions and investor borrowing that was linked to new construction. So all those new construction properties that were put in the pipeline, or were to be put in the pipeline between 2017 to 2019, there's that sort of 3 to 5 year lag between when they would have been started and now. And that's one of the reasons why we're seeing fewer property. The other reason I'm seeing as well is people are reluctant to let go of their property because it's at a lower value at what they purchased in 2021, 2022 as a result. So, you know, there's a few reasons why there are fewer listings on the market.
So does that scare the buyer though, is what I'm trying to get at, Gianni? Because for me, from a buyer's perspective, there's apprehension, and it might be clearly just psychological, everyone. Yeah, where there's like, has it bottomed out yet? Yeah, has it bottomed? And this is a timing problem. Like everyone, we're not in here to time the market. Timing the market is dangerous as anything.
Yeah.
But I feel like the bottom or when the stock market is falling, I have the same feeling that people have at the moment with property, which is like, it hasn't bottomed out yet. We haven't had the fixed interest rate cliff. They've got people maybe wanting to sell in springtime. You know, it's going to open up supply. Now's not the time. I've got to jump on this property in December, for example. But what I'm finding is that conversation is not one conversation. That's conversations 1, 2, you know, dozens of potential people that are having the same conversation. And what are you feeling that? I know I'm going to give you my angle on for that cohort, what's important for them to know.
Yeah, so look, I don't think it's a fear of, you know, trying to time the bottom of the market, because I personally believe that the bottom was 6 months ago, especially in sort of Sydney and Melbourne. We've seen prices rise every month for the last 6 months. So there's a clear upward trend in property values and home value indexes in a number of capital cities. Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, they're all sort of coming up now. I fear it's a fear of a double dip, that property prices will go down again. And there's also a fear of subsequent interest rate increases as well, because I think people are doing it tough. We all know inflation is high, but because interest rates have been increasing and they have sort of tapered off in terms of momentum, there's a fear of, like, you know, another 1 or 2 interest rate rises. And that will be the point that people will get into the market, because they think that more listings will come onto the market through distressed selling, or there'll be a better time to buy in that occasion. But not, I don't think it's because people are trying to time the bottom. But I think the bottom is come and gone. If anything, we're seeing from the data that we're only sort of 2, 3, maybe 4% off peak prices that we were back in early January 2021 in some capital cities.
I think that's very good insights. I think the other thing that people need to also be aware is that if everyone's saying something, that means that it's usually a demand side problem. Demand, same supply even, or limited supply, means that the price goes up. So if everyone's saying the same thing, that's the case. What is interesting though is there are some economists talking about the double dip. Yeah. And it's one of those things is, does these economic factors that bring prices down overweigh what brings prices up? See, property is very interesting in the fact that we have some of the highest household debt to asset ratios in the world. Yeah, but we do have some good things that are going for us as well too. Okay, I think there's some other countries that have much bigger problems than we've got in Australia. 2 is how many people can hold on to these interest rate rises. You know, we've been on hold for 2 months in regards to the cash rate. Does it continue to stay on hold? A lot of the banks are saying, yeah, that rating cycle is done. If it does do that, can people adjust their finances enough to be able to hold on? Well, so far, like you've said, Gianni, from a supply side, they have. Can they continue to do that? If they can continue to do that, supply is not really going to change in my eyes.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to have potentially increase in demand. I would imagine that immigration is not stopping anytime soon. Yeah, there's a lot of job shortages. There's a lot of, still that needs to be done and a lot of things that need to be filled. So potentially that could be a demand side of things. But I think the most important factor is property is a long-term asset.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I think people get a little bit caught up with what's happening in the next 6 months rather than what's happening in the next 15 years. And I know you talk about this with probably a lot of people who sometimes are apprehensive to, pull the trigger. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are getting caught up in the 6 month, 12-month window, aren't they?
Yeah, look, you and I both know, yes, property is a long-term asset. I wouldn't even consider buying property if it was less than sort of 7 or 8 years. That being said, I think people are trying to time the market to save, 20, 30,000 here or there. But in the grand scheme of things, when you look long term, the risk of trying to time the market could potentially outweigh the overall time in the market and your long-term gains. Because yes, property could bottom, property could double dip again later this year for whatever reason. But at the end of it, is it worth, risking a potential dip for time in the market when in fact we've seen so many economists and banks and even get it wrong to forecast double dips? Famously the RBA director Philip Lowe said rates are going to stay on hold until 2024 at these ultra low rates. So even that, people forecasting so far into the future, it can't be treated as gospel. You have to look at an investment at face value here and now. And we can only forecast, a few months in advance. Even when I look at the data, we look at short-term data to say, is this poised for capital growth in the next year or so based on the leading indicators? But we can't forecast years in advance. That's the longer we look into the future, the more variability and volatility that there's going to be involved in our forecasts. I just don't think that we're good enough to do that. That's all.
Well, just an interesting one that weathermen are more reliable than economists. So that tells you something.
Yeah.
Very interesting because there's this sole focus on interest rates where actually, to be honest with you, there wasn't probably when interest rates were falling, there wasn't this kind of discussion around that interest rates help pump the market, and then where they come down, it's kind of retracted the market. But economically speaking, everyone, there's way more factors than just the interest rate, as Gianni was talking about. And so if your sole focus is interest rates have gone up, that means that prices come down, X plus Y must equal Z. That's not economics. Yeah. Economics isn't as simple as that. There's other contributing factors. Is there government stimulus? Is there certain areas that are growing? And, trying to find a good asset for a long period of time is hard. It's hard for some of the best people out there. And the other one that's very, very important for everyone to know is right now, making a big purchase like that, or even selling, your emotions, they're going to be wreaking havoc on you. So, your emotions might be at all-time highs, but you don't even realize. Yeah. And what happens is in those points in time, you make illogical decisions. Okay. And so what we need to do is we need to remove ourselves from those positions to say, is it logical for us to make this buy, to make this sell? What is that going to mean? Because I feel a lot of sense of the discussions that I'm having with people around property, it's not logical. It's emotional. Yeah. And they need to put that away from them. Yeah, they need to put it away. They need to, like when we work with people's plans, it's very much around, like Gianni said, are we holding this asset for 7 to 10 years? Are we using it for leverage purposes to do X, Y, and Z? We need to be very, very careful, regardless of what market you're in, to buy a good asset, buy it when you should be buying it, or selling an asset when you should be selling an asset. Yeah. Don't get just caught up in the FOMO of what people are doing on the way up. Don't get caught up in the fear mongering and everything that's going on the way down. Yeah. I know my property is Gianni. As long as my cash flow is good and I've set up my plan, I have no intention on selling those properties, and unless someone gives me a ridiculous offer that I can't refuse. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the way I have always seen my properties. But I think the other thing is, Gianni, is around, this is what's happened recently in regards to property from my financial advisor mind. It has done it really, really good for investors in the long term. Number one, interest rates or cash rates at 0% or close to, yeah, they're not normal. Yeah. Get you accustomed to get your cash flow in a position where kind of where it is now is the norm. Like, statistically speaking, where 6 to 7% is kind of the norm interest rate. Get your budgets and your cash flows in an area like that. Yeah. And always with a little bit of a buffer, and get used to that. Also get used to that, or get an understanding, because people thought houses and bank account money was the same risk appetite. Yeah. Property is a growth asset that's got good things to it, and it's got bad things to it. Good things, you can earn a ton of money if you know how to do it and you hold it for a long period of time. If you hold it for a short period of time, not knowing what you're doing and have the wrong risk appetite towards, you can be disastrous and lose money. And so everyone, what you're seeing in these horror stories, I want you to look at and see why that broke down. Why did that happen? Why did that person buy in 2022 $1.5 million house and now selling it for 1.3 mil? Gianni, we talk about this. The main reason why that person's selling is not because the suburb changed or the house quality changed. It's usually because that person's under really distress. Yeah. And usually they've made a ridiculous offer on the way up. So their emotions were just playing like, I need that house, babe, and I'll do whatever I need to do to buy it, isn't it?
And I've seen the opposite as well. I've seen people sell out of fear, out of media headlines, or I'll never forget, I ran into a lady at the beginning of the pandemic, just before the very first lockdown. She sold out of fear. And I'm thinking she sold a multi-million-dollar home out of fear, and that place probably would be worth 30% more nowadays in 3 years later. And I'm sure she'd be kicking herself. But I think fear makes us, or emotions makes us do, illogical things. And that being said, that's why I feel you need a team of professionals behind you to support you through these decisions and reviewing your strategy, reviewing your finances on a day-to-day basis, because we know what our goals are. Our goals are tied to emotions, but to achieve those goals, we need to make emotionless decisions and calculated decisions rather than reacting to news headlines or what Uncle Bill said at the barbecue or things like that,
Why do, like, one of the biggest attributes around a successful investor, everyone, regardless if it's property, stocks, whatever the hell it is, successful investing is removing emotion. Removing emotion. Like that lady that you talked about, someone bought that property. So some person's got fear and some person's got greed. And from the quote of the successful Warren Buffett, be greedy when people are fearful and be fearful when people are greedy. Yeah. If you had to write a scorecard, yeah, are people optimistic, greedy, blah, 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 like, or are they not? Should give you a nice pulse check. And Howard Marks actually has a scorecard, which it reminds me, I should circle it around to people, that actually where you can see if an asset is kind of overvalued and in the state of the economy. And he's bang on this. Like, if you go to like the crypto craze or the NFT craze, people were calling me like, oh, John, you just hate that stuff because you can't advise on it or whatever. No, like that shit's ridiculous. Like, you're buying a $1 million digital print with the hope of, and like soon as there's mania, that's greed. So when you talk about the property market, where it was probably around like post-COVID, around like 2022, maybe 21, 22 on the way up. Yeah. I must admit, Gianni, it got a little bit ridiculous from my side. Like people were just like buying property for the sake of buying property. It wasn't even involved in a strategy. It was my mate bought it and I think it's a good idea. I'm just going to go buy it. Yeah. But the good investors, they actually bought it 12 months before. They're reaping the rewards of that up and that pressure. So even when this tank or stabilization or whatever the hell you want, even if you call it a double dip, those people that are bought in clear fear of everyone, they're winning. Now, the reality is, people say, John, aren't you then advocating for timing the market? Well, not really. See, when you build a financial strategy for yourself, there's what they call your target asset allocation. And this is for everyone to know. When we work with clients in financial planning or there's this target asset allocation. And let's say this target asset allocation is, say, 40, make it simple, 40% in stocks, 40% in shares, 20% in cash. Yeah. Now, the reason why you have a target asset allocation is going to keep you strategically aligned, but also the risk return, so risk is the pie and the diversification, will then spit out a probability of a return. So I know I'm getting technical, but I think people need to know the understanding of the technicality around this. So if the property market goes down by, say, 20%, my 40% allocation that I should have in property has shrunk. It's shrunk to 30% or 20% or whatever it's shrunk to in my big pie. Yeah. So then what happens is that strategic asset allocation, which I should be reviewing at least once to twice a year to rebalance that portfolio, is saying to me, John, you need to add more money towards your property portfolio to make sure that you have that risk appetite, which what you want, or that profile, what you want, and also to have the return objective to achieve my goals and aspirations. Now, most people, Gianni, aren't going through that process to be able to do it, but the successful people are. So when that's happening, it's not that these investors are timing the market. They're reading their strategic asset allocation, and the strategic asset allocation is telling them to make a logical decision, which is stock market's down, top it up. Property market's down, top it up. And this is, I think, the difference between amateurs and professionals.
Yeah, and the same when property prices are up. Like if property prices are overweight in your portfolio, and you think, oh, look, I'm overexposed to the property market, then consider letting a property go, especially if you've made a decent profit on it.
Yeah.
And at the same time.
And the other thing we do, because we don't like to turn over property, and I'm open in discussing with this, sometimes we'll rip equity out of property and reallocate it into another asset classes to rebalance the portfolio of where it needs to be for clients. Because property, like you want to hold property, you want to hold stocks for as long as you need to. But, a strategy for stocks, for example, is we might be not reinvesting the stocks. We might be taking the dividends. So on the way up, you're taking it, replenishing your cash. Yeah. So there's many techniques to kind of rebalance. But this is that for me, this is financial planning. And this is why our clients, who listen, get the results, because they're executing on a plan. And over time, it's just over and over and over again. And everyone, Gianni studied financial planning. So when I talk to Gianni, he understands what I'm saying here. For those listening at home and hearing this, for our clients, we do this for you. So you don't need to worry. Yeah. But for those who aren't our clients, I want you to reflect on your property strategy. Reflect on your financial plan and be honest with yourself. Like, why did you buy that property? Or why didn't you buy that property? What are you doing? And if you're not at the level in which me and Gianni are talking about, you're going to a gunfight with a butter knife. Yeah. And that's the reality. It's sad because the wealthy are getting wealthier and the people who are making the choices are getting wealthier. But the people who aren't doing this and are scared to pay for professionals or go do the research or whatever they're going to do, they're just getting further and further and further and further away because it works. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. You're going to a gunfight with a butter knife. I'm going to use that as a quote.
I can see that circling around on socials. But that's it. Gianni, absolute pleasure. Sounds like there's a lot of people holding out to sell their properties, and that seems like it's going to be the trend as people continue to hold on. Buyers Gianni's tip, be patient. Yeah, it's probably the big one, Gianni. And probably the other one, Gianni, is there is a lot of noise, yeah, and probably to cut a lot of that noise out of people's lives and focus on the things that you can control, which is your own personal finances and your own strategies. Gianni, thank you very much. Nice catching up with you. We'll be sure to catch up soon again. For everyone, have a great night and we'll speak soon. Cheers.
Thanks, John. My pleasure. Same.